with Budget in Focus. We're discussing Budget 25, Budget 2025. I'm Mervyn Williams. With me is Elson Lowe. And together we're going to be talking with Christopher Jones, MP. Christopher has just made his presentation in Budget Debate 2025. And we thank you for joining us as we speak with Chris. Chris, you had some problems. You had some trouble there with the Speaker of the National Assembly as you tried to communicate your thoughts on corruption. We can use it here, although we're within the premises that houses the National Assembly, but we're not on the floor, so it's quite okay to speak about corruption here. Where were you going? You were identifying some elements of corruption. You were pointing to some actual cases of corruption. I know you couldn't get that out there on the floor the way you wanted to talk to us about what's happening in that area.
All right. Thank you very much, Mervyn and Elson. Essentially, the PPP is trying its utmost to suppress what every Guyanese are aware of or knows about. There is massive corruption in almost every government ministry and agency. So much so that now at the United Nations level, just recently when Guyana was invited there to make a representation on behalf of Guyana, the committee members there asked the very same question. And in fact, they expressed the frustration of the Guyanese people about allegations of corruption in government ministries and ministers of the government, and wanting to know why those allegations have not been investigated. In the House, I've always stated that the Speaker of the Assembly is essentially a gatekeeper of the PPP. And his role is to ensure that certain questions, motions, and so forth from the opposition never see the light of day. But now it has gone beyond that point, a point in which now he is trying to suppress the use of words, which essentially, once those words are used, it puts the PPP in the very light that it should be as being corrupt. In the Parliament of Guyana, there is, as you are aware, Mervyn, there are statement phrases that you can't use on another member of the House. For example, one such restricted word is corrupt. So I can't say that the Honorable Minister X or Minister Y is corrupt, though that particular word is restricted.
This is about context.
Exactly. It's about context. How does one make a presentation? For example, Gail Teixeira and her ministry last year held a forum on anti-corruption and human rights.
So they couldn't report on that in the Parliament.
I couldn't even quote what was the name of the event that it was had. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But regardless of what they do, what the Speaker does to restrict the word, the Guyanese people are aware. And the mere fact that the PPP is now going to this extent, it tells you that they too are fully aware and fully cognizant of corruption in all of these agencies, corruption involving the ministers of the government, their spouses, their children, and the fact that ministers of the government have shell companies that are awarded hundreds of millions of dollars of tax money. People are aware. And going into 2025, in this general and regional elections, the PPP, or the people of this country rather, will ensure that they see the back of the People's Progressive Party Civic. Mervyn, you served in Parliament before, and you know it is essentially successive PPP governments. It's always rampant corruption with them. So it's nothing different now.
Elson, there is this representation by Teixeira and the clerk of the National Assembly that there's this list of unparliamentary words that were inherited and remain on the books. But I can tell you that from my own experience in an earlier parliament, the use of the word corruption was not prohibited in the Guyana parliament. It may have been on the list of words there, but it was not enforced because it was a necessary way of expressing
Yeah.
what's happening in the country so that
Yeah,
the oversight could be given.
it's a bit
You know?
more of a principle or an idea, not necessarily saying that a specific individual is correct, which therefore, should mean that it is allowable. But the only question we gotta ask Guyanese, or what we have to point Guyanese towards, is why is the PPP making such an effort to avoid talking about
Yeah.
corruption? Why is this such
Well,
such an
precisely.
issue? And it seems that this is just an effort by the PPP. When it comes to the word corruption, the PPP seems to be focused on hiding whatever it is that these allegations are. Now, one of the things we also, and Chris, you spoke a bit about the corruption, but we also want to help Guyanese to understand that the consequence of all of this corruption is that their money is not being spent on Guyanese for the cost of living, on better wages for our citizens, on support for students. Rather, it's going into the pockets of family, friends, and favorites. Chris, you spoke a bit about the quality of the water that we've got in Guyana. And in a country where from 2020 to now you've seen the budget become 4 times larger.
Correct.
You would think we'd have 4 times better water, or at least
Exactly.
we'd have more and better quality water.
Exactly.
So corruption is one of the questions that many Guyanese are asking around the quality of basic services like electricity, like water. Chris, speak a bit about what's going on.
Yeah, and that is the point. You see, the PPP is good with the propaganda and having access to the state machinery to pump their propaganda out. But the realities on the ground, the ministers can say how this 1.3 trillion plus dollars will benefit the people and they will do this and that, but the reality, the people on the ground, like I spoke about the woman from Westminster, and this is on a segment called What Frets You. And every day on that program, you will have Guyanese expressing issues across the country: poor drainage and irrigation, recently constructed roads that are now broken up, bridges that were built 2 months ago that fall apart. The reality is on the ground. And that is why, like the leader of the opposition continues to me, once you are on the ground with the people and you know the issues, the people, we can continue to propagandize. But the reality, the man is feeling it in the pocket. You can't go to the marketplace with a $50,000 to buy ration for an entire month. You will just go home with 2 bags. The $5,000 that they're giving to our senior citizens, that's not an increase. $3,000 extra for public assistance, and you are passing a budget of $1.3 trillion with a population less than 1 million people. The only way, I can say it here, the only way the PPP ministers and other senior government officials can continue to thief, they have to place those monies in public infrastructure.
I want to stick with water for a second because we're going to go right there where you're going. The minister responsible for water spoke today.
Yes.
In another place at another time, she reported that 98.3% of the Guyanese population have access to potable water. She bragged again today about water and water quality, water availability. But the junior black tank minister, who was in full live in Guyana mode today, he is all the way up the east, this Linden Susdike Highway, distributing black tanks for people to catch water off their roofs.
Exactly.
That's a contradiction.
Exactly.
And it tells you that there's an open admission that enough is not being done in that particular sector, as in all sectors, even though the glorious picture is being painted. What are the Guyanese working class people supposed to get from this budget?
Listen, I spoke about the woman from Perfect Harmony. I reside in Georgetown. If you go on my Facebook page, for example, you will see weeks after weeks in succession, I keep showing the water quantity that I'm getting. In order for us in Georgetown to wash whites, you have to set buckets of water and leave it overnight. In these new housing schemes, there's no water supply. And it tells you about the poor planning of the PPP. Because if you are about to establish a new community, the first thing that's supposed to go down is roads, drain, water. You heard Sherrod Duncan spoke about people essentially turning up in fields looking for their lands and so forth.
Yeah.
It is poor planning. It's poor planning or no planning.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The issue of public infrastructure projects, Elson and I have discussed this over and over. We spoke about it again today with Jaretta, and you've raised it here again. Public infrastructure projects are being designed, A, to transfer money
Yes.
to a certain group of people,
Yes.
B, to ensure that the quality of work is of such a standard that you have to repeat
Correct. Correct.
the construction process within a
Right.
short time,
Mhm.
keeping money flowing in a certain direction. In an economy such as ours, which is benefiting from large revenue inflows at this time, should not there be a more prudent approach to the management of these resources? The national cry is that this money is not it's not getting into the pockets of the citizens of this country who are most in need. Do you detect any measures to try to even
To reach the people?
to pretend to reach the people?
No. But that's the thing. One would have expected that in a budget year, that the PPP might have shy some goodies in the budget, that you create exactly election year budget, that it creates a difficulty for you as an opposition member to sort of punch holes inside. It's just blatant. As I mentioned in my budget speech, it is a case that they just don't care. The PPP, as you know, love to create mendicants. If every few weeks or months the PPP can say we have a cash grant to $5,000 and the people line up, and that's what they like. That's how they intend to govern. They will never enrich public servants by increasing their wages and salary of such that they are independent. They would never do that. The PPP, in order for the PPP to survive in office,
They give you just enough.
they give you
To
just
survive.
enough to survive. And when that is run out, then they come back and give you something more. That's not how you govern a country. There's a talk about the Dutch disease, and this was part of my budget presentation that I was unable to mention. There is the Dutch disease, but the challenge that the Guyanese people have is the PPP disease. The PPP disease is worse than the Dutch disease, because the PPP disease ensures that the wealth of this country goes only to their friends, family, and favorites. It is so blatant that I can take you to Berbice and show you a minister or minister's sons who have contracts for over $400 million. The boys they're swagging on their WhatsApp and social media platform. One by a Lexus, the other one looking for some bigger vehicle, to the extent that they've now purchased a yacht. You know the guy is saying you got enough money for pelt dog. That's what's going on. And for the PPP, it is never enough. It is never enough. And that's why we say that this allocation with public infrastructure is to.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much, Chris and Elson. We're completely out of time. We're heading back to the floor of the National Assembly where the presentations continue. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back shortly.